Hi everyone. The presentation that I have prepared. So I've taken a lot of photographs of Russian immigration period in open sources. There are a lot of them. With regards to the Greece leg of the trip, there was released not long ago. There was the 100th anniversary of Russian Exodus. And Russian Exodus actually is not marked on 1917, it's marked on around 1920, 1921. And so in connection with the recent anniversary of Russian Exodus, there was released a big book of photographs and memories of the immigrants recorded by their descendants, and lots of photographs provided from different family archives. So it all can be found in open access. However, in Russian, not in English. I'm not sure if it's available in English with regards to Greece. So that's basically the two big sources that I have been using for these tours. And as I said, next weekend there's going to be the second episode, and I'm hoping also to include the story of Tunisia, the desert that happens to be another corner of the world. Quite an unexpected one, I would say, quite an unexpected turn. A bit too far, I would say, from the eye of the storm. But yes, that's also one of the corners of the world where Russian immigrants fled after the Bolsheviks, and the Civil War. So far, we have covered many countries of Europe. We started with Turkey, and we mainly spoke about the immigration exactly in the 1920s, 1921, mainly the big immigration that happened from Crimea, from the south, because the White Army, which was opposed to the Red Army of the Bolsheviks, so the White Army movement, and many people fled to the south of the country because, well, people had some time. People just bought some time because the revolution hadn't really reached that part of Russia, and it took the Bolsheviks more time to get there. So that's why we're talking here about 1920s, 1921, and that's when the massive Russian exodus started. But with Greece, it is a little bit different, to be honest. How so? And here we need to remember the First World War, in which the Ottoman Empire lost. And after the defeat of the Ottoman Empire, Greece took over the towns of Smyrna and Izmir. And I would say, quite a big share of the population were Orthodox Greeks, Greek Christians. However, it was one part of the story. It's quite important. We will understand why later on. And also, it's important to remember that after the 1917 revolution, the Civil War started, and the First World War was still going on. And it was important for European countries, especially England, France, to not to let Bolsheviks take over. For many reasons, but reason number one is that Bolsheviks would have immediately withdrawn from the war, from the Eastern Front, and that's at that point it was quite crucial. So they didn't want to let Bolsheviks take over completely. That's why France, Greece, and Romania. Intervention started to Odessa, to the southern parts of the Russian Empire, and this is the photo of the first battalion of national defense. They are marching on their way to the port to get on the ships and sail to Odessa ports. The idea was to help the White Army movement headed by General Denikin to withstand the Bolsheviks' onslaught. It didn't really prove, I would say, effective. It didn't really help much, but that exactly gave rise to the first Russian immigration. Before the massive exodus, which would happen later on in the 1920s, I would say, a small share of people, several thousands of people that came to Greece, mainly to Greece. And those would be the immigrants from Odessa. This is, well, because Odessa was an international port city, there was a big share of Jewish population that also left for Greece, and a lot of, obviously, Russian nobility. So that's how it started. So the first Russian immigrants came to Greece even before they would come to Turkey. Well, for example, this is also the photo found in, by the way, in just Wikipedia. So it was again the expansion of the Greek troops before their intervention. They were called basically intervention troops, and so that's the photo taken in 1990 in Odessa. So that's exactly the international forces coming to the port on their ships. That's exactly what it says here. This is the landing of the expeditionary force in Crimea in 1919. These are the Greek soldiers, by the way, in Odessa. And when these immigrants, when those immigrants from Odessa and other southern towns came to Greece, there at that point still was the representative of the Russian Empire. It was Elim Demidov. He was sort of an ambassador of the Russian Empire in Greece, even though at that point there hadn't been the country called the Russian Empire. Still, the representation, the support to those immigrants was there. Not on international level just yet, because France was pretty much involved in the intervention. The Russian immigrants did not really get much of support from anyone but the Demidov and his wife. It's an interesting story, by the way, that why Demidov, a representative of the very old family dynasty, all of a sudden was a prince of San Donato. The thing is that his uncle, Anatoly Demidov, had married the niece of Napoleon in the 19th century, and the wedding took place in Italy, and well, it was sort of a gift from the government of Italy, the title of a Prince of San Donato. And that title, ever since the 19th century, would be passed on into the generations of the Demidovs. So at that point, we're talking 1990, Elim Demidov and his wife were in charge of the immigration. They were not really obliged to do that, again, because there was no country actually already, and but they felt it was their duty to help, because those would be exactly, again, the people, the like-minded people, the aristocrats, the merchants, first of all, who left. So Sofia Demidova she was always into charities, into support to the poor, regardless of religion, by the way, and she carried on with that. Even, I would say, even with the bigger force, she was eager to help. There was a first sort of a community center, the very first hospitals, the very first supplies would be arranged at their own expense. They didn't have any budget for that. There hadn't been any monetary support, because the country had no longer existed. So it was all done at their expense, and they are remembered for that even nowadays. So that was something, I would say, quite unexpected. Obviously, those were not only aristocrats, and regardless of people background, the Demidovs helped everyone. Everyone. And that was a big deal, because, again, as I said, the state support would come only much, much later. But yes, obviously they could not provide a big school building. They couldn't provide, I would say, much. It would be the camps first it would be just the camps, and later on they would be some sort of a community centers in the which basically churches were, and we will talk about how things evolved. And all these photos were published in this big book dedicated to the anniversary of Russian exodus. But again, on a larger scale, the immigration started only in 1920s, 1921, 1922. Well, this is when exactly, again, in Crimea, also Novorossiysk, it's also the region of the Black Sea. That's exactly where the Russian government in exile, headed by General Peter Wrangel, who was the head of the White Army movement, but also on a larger scale, he was kind of a spiritual and the official leader of the government in exile, as they proclaimed themselves. This is when they basically jumped on the very, very last ships, and it took several months altogether to do that. That's when the Russian army, together with the families, eventually evacuated, and the most would go to Turkey, but some would go to Greece. Let's say we're talking here really about just couple of percent, because out of this 1,100,000 something people that left over the course of these couple of years, about from 10 to 15,000, according to some sources, even up to 10,000 left for Greece. But I'm not including those who left before the larger exodus, right? I'm not talking about the aftermath of the interventions. So this is Wrangel. In case you forgot, I spoke a lot about him on multiple tours before that. Eventually, Wrangel moved from Turkey to Paris, and he was in charge of the Russian sort of liberation movement, and he was the leader not only of the former army people, but in general of the Russian immigrants, not only intelligentsia, but in general. So he was a big deal. Apart from army, there was also Cossacks. You see people wearing papachas. You see people wearing the quite a different outfit. So there was also Cossacks who were originally very loyal to the Tsar. They also left, and some eventually would go to Greece. And then out of those, let's say up to 10,000 people, only 3,000 or 4,000 eventually stayed in Greece and continued there. But most would definitely head for Europe, is mainly because of the spiritual leaders and the actual leaders moving there as well. But nevertheless, so the immigration started. These are the photos of those stormy 1921, 1922, when this big exodus started. And in terms of Greece, most immigrants would go to the island of Lemnos. And this is the photo now. It looks quite nice. Well, a lot of houses, some not too lush, but some greenery, mountains, the sea, Aegean Sea, by the way. But back in the days, it looked a lot less welcoming, I would say. In general, from multiple memoirs that I have read by now, it was very windy during wintertime, and it was too hot during summertime. And you see, it doesn't look that welcoming in these photos taken approximately the same time. So we're talking here 1920s. And when those ships approached the shores of the island of Lemnos, they would not be allowed to disembark and come off the shore. By that point, it was already the French that controlled big parts of Greece after the First World War, and it's not like French took over. It was just I would say the situation from the times of the First World War, and well, Greece and France were allies. Romania as well. Romania also participated in the intervention, by the way, England as well, but mainly with we're talking here about France, Greece, and Romania. So for 1 month, those people would not be allowed to come to the land, right, to get off the ship. And many people suffered from multiple diseases. Some people died on board. And eventually, after 1 month, when France decided to let them get off the ships, the first thing that they started doing is just burying the dead. Just imagine. So on the one hand, and this is the photo. So one of the first cemeteries. The cemetery appeared even before the camp, the immigrants camp was set up. And on the one hand, the concerns of the French army would be exactly the disease and the quarantine. But imagine how many people died and what kind of diseases could have spread by then. So eventually, so the bodies were buried. There were children, there were women, there were men, anyone. So after that, the camp was settled, was set up, and it was again just the tents. Most people would sleep on the ground. Sometimes they could make for themselves like a thin mattress from the dried grass and something else, but largely I would say people just slept on the ground in those tents, and it would go like this for years, for actually over a year. And then little by little things would get better, but we're not at that point yet. Um, It's also important to mention how all that was arranged and how so who would be allowed to be given the medical service, who would be allowed to leave the camp and well, settle elsewhere in Greece. Mainly that was all arranged by Olga, Grand Duchess Olga Konstantinovna Romanova. And here I need to go back in time and explain you how a Russian Grand Duchess, granddaughter of Nicholas I, right? Nicholas I ruled in mid-19th century. We're talking here about she became the queen consort of all the Hellenes much later in the 1870s, and when Greece got independence from the Ottoman Empire. But the thing is that Greece was not given the autonomy. Greece was not given the right to elect their own government, and it would be Europe that would appoint. That would appoint the rulers, and it was decided that it would be the Russian princess and the Danish prince to rule Greece. So that's how non-Greeks ended up on the throne of the land of the Hellenes. So this is her wearing a Greek costume. The Grand Duchess Olga Konstantinovna, she was raised in Peterhof, where, by the way, we are heading to in September. On my website, anreguy.com, there are a bunch of tours already up, and including the September Peterhof episodes. And she was very young when she got married and left Russia. It was clearly, well, she was daughter of Grand Duke Konstantin Nikolaevich, so he was the second son of Nicholas I. And despite Grand Duke Konstantin liked his daughter, he doted her. He knew that it would be marriage of convenience. It was a very political marriage to George I, who was the brother to this lady, Maria Feodorovna, the Dagmara, right? So the Danish princess. She had already been in Russia by that time, and she was happy. It was well, it was all meant to solidify the strength and the union between Denmark and the Russian Empire. And well, so that was seen as a really good match. Again, politically, not we're not talking about feelings here. Just politics. So that's why Grand Duchess Olga Konstantinovna she married Charles I when she was 16, and they went to Greece. And the next year, she was just 17, their first child was born. And then every year, every 2 years, another child would be born. Surprisingly, it turned out to be a very good marriage. They truly fell in love with each other, and they were happy as a family, and surprisingly they were respected by the Hellenes, by the people of Greece. And it's important to understand that because of the constant wars, Greece was in a very bad condition. These two people, they helped Greece recuperate from the Ottoman rule for hundreds of years. The worst was yet to come, obviously, but and when they came, they didn't know a word in Greek. They had good teachers. Well, the children, so eventually 5 children would be bilingual. They would speak Greek. Well, from their birth, basically. And eventually they would be proud of their people and of the country. This is the coronation ceremony, and up until 1913, Grand Duchess Olga Konstantinovna would be in charge of multiple projects, a lot of charity work, a lot of money, also her own money and state budget would be spent on the rehabilitation from the Ottoman rule and the improvement of the situation, construction of hospitals, educational facilities, many things. Also the establishment of rapport and international relations with other European countries. So things were looking very bright up until 1913, when Charles was assassinated, and Olga Konstantinovna left for Russia, and she would only come back in the 1920s. She was also stuck in Russia before before the borders would be open after the revolution, and in the 1920s she went back. So she returned to Greece, and upon her return to Greece, she started the negotiations with France and the Greek government on her behalf, and because she was basically a viceroy, and also with France on the opening, the refugee camps for Russian immigrants. And eventually, only thanks to her, everything was arranged. So even though she could not directly change a lot, because it was the French contingent and the French government that could fund the arrival of the immigrants, of the refugees. They were not really called immigrants; they were called refugees at that point. It's important to remember. So she could not, I would say, ask them not to keep them for 1 month on board of the ships, but she is exactly the one who made it happen altogether. So without her, there wouldn't have been any camps at all, and we wouldn't have been talking about the Greek leg of the trip of the refugees. And further on, as the story develops, we will be talking more about her, about Olga Konstantinovna, and her support of the Russian immigrants. Again, regardless of the background, this would not be just Russian merchants or Russian aristocrats, people of all walks of life. She really couldn't care less. And the same was in Greece before the refugees started coming in. It will be helping the Greek people regardless of their origins and background. So she built several hospitals, and they were called Russian hospitals, such as this one is Piraeus, but it was not for Russians. It was just called Russian hospital because it was built with the money coming from the Russian Empire. So there were built several hospitals in different countries of Greece. In Thessaloniki, there was a big hospital constructed, not this one. That's Thessaloniki, and in several more towns, and on the island of Lemnos as well. Well, that's the Russian hospital in Thessaloniki. Um, so that's 1920. So that's when the Wrangel's army started to arrive. So that's the photo from that book released for the anniversary of the Exodus, arrival of the ship carrying Russian soldiers and officers of the Russian army. Altogether, there were 3 French cruise ships that brought people to Lemnos, so 1920s. And among those people, sorry for the typo, let me see the... Grisha, please, boys, this is loud, okay? I'm so sorry. Um, Thank you so much for letting me know, Sharon. So um, I will I will be talking about some people that, let's say, you've never heard before, and I've never heard about them before. So just everyday people, average people who served in the army, who were merchants, who were some were aristocrats, and also be talking about, I would say, the people that are remembered, that really contributed a lot to the community, and they're still remembered largely by the descendants. Well, for example, again, sorry for the typo, among those people who arrived with the first ships would be Vice Admiral Levitsky. As I said, many eventually would move elsewhere, and Levitsky moved to Estonia. And in Estonia, which also had, I would say, very little Russian immigrant community, he became one of the central figures, and the cultural life of the Russian community revolved around him. So he was a distinguished admiral, and well, he worked closely with Wrangel, but eventually, well, Wrangel went to Paris, and he remained in Estonia. Or there was Rear Admiral Alexander Plotho from a well-known Russian marine dynasty. This family, over the course of 300 years, ever since times of Peter the Great, they kind of produced about 30 marine engineers, captains, admirals, and well, and you name it. And by the way, Alexander Plotho in early 1900s was at the footsteps exactly of the establishment of the submarine fleet of the Russian Empire. So he was also among those refugees. Eventually, he and his family and children, they stayed in Greece. By the way, one of his children was born in 1920. He was 6 months old when they had to get on the board of this French cruise ship. Rusich, it was called. That was their ship, and so his son Alexander came in the age of 6 months. At the age of 6 months, to Greece. Eventually, Alexander Plotho moved to France. He passed away only in 2018. He was 99 years old when he passed away, and he is known, he's still remembered as one of the most brilliant historians and specialists of Russian immigration. He not only did he investigate the the French part of the story, but also other communities scattered around Europe. So he traveled a lot. He left a lot of research. So Alexander Plato, 1920, 2018. So, just a few people. There are a lot of names. The amazing thing is that thanks to some other Russian immigrants, refugees slash immigrants, whom I will be talking about also on the coming episodes. We have a lot of names recorded. They, unlike I would say in Turkey and some other countries, we know exactly how many people were buried in which cemetery, and how many, and what the people died from, how people died. It was all very well documented. Well, okay, I'm gonna cut them some slack because there were not so many people, let's say, compared to Turkey, compared to France. Obviously, it wasn't like that, so it was a lot easier. But in general, there were many other things to do. There were many, many other things to do, especially due to the fact that in 1922, the army of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk of the independent Turkey managed to take over Izmir and Smyrna, which caused the big Asia Minor catastrophe when the Orthodox Greek population had to be, a lot of it was massacred, but largely after the big fire of Smyrna, which you must have heard from on your history classes, the two countries had to exchange their populations. So Greece had to deport all the Muslim population to Turkey, and Turkey had to deport all the Greek Orthodox population. So that's why it wasn't so easy. Because at the same time, when the Russian refugees started coming in, couple years later, and again, the process coming from Russia it happened just all at once. It would be ongoing and ongoing. It would be several waves of it. And 1922, this is when the big Asia Minor catastrophe happened, and then lots of Greeks would be coming to Greece. I mean, ethnic Greeks would be coming to Greece again, and altogether there were thousands of people, dozens of thousands of people who had no idea what to do about their life. Well, these are the Cossacks. So Cossacks were also there. They were also quartered in that camp for over a year and a half. And it's very much similar to the Gallipoli standstill, the same life in the tents, still trying to maintain the, I would say, more or less similar way of life as it was in the south of Russia back in the times of the Civil War. But poverty, horrible conditions, and to top it all off, is that a year later, the French government said that they would withdraw all the funding, and Greece had to be providing all the support to the refugees on its own. So Greece had to provide the support to the Greek immigrants coming from Asia Minor, and also to Russian refugees. And Greece itself was still recuperating from the First World War. So, well, again, thanks to support of the Romanovs, that continued. But that didn't help, I would say, much, because there was, imagine, Russian immigrants, they didn't speak any Greek at all. The Greek immigrants coming from Asia Minor, however, did. So their competition was quite severe. However, most of the Greek immigrants from the former Ottoman Empire times, from Asia Minor, they were not exactly educated. I suggest skipping the Q&A and just wrap it up a little earlier to have a Q&A session in the end as usual, and we'll carry on in a week. Next week. The tour is already published, by the way. It's already on my website, the schedule. So I will inform you, and I'll send you the link, and I'll share the link afterwards. So the most Greek population was uneducated. So that's eventually when Russian immigrants, sort of refugees slash immigrants, they kind of found a few options, such as land surveying, by the way. So the land survey became a very important thing after the First World War, when and such profession was in a demand, and because there were so many military people who studied similar things, mapping in the army. So that's when many Russian refugees, former military people, were able to find a job as land surveyors. So in geodesy, it was definitely it was the Russian market, so to speak. Um, these people, some of these people had never really done any land surveying, but they were quick on the draw, and they learned it really quickly. And yes, the Russian specialists got in demand, and they were very good at land surveying. It's also an interesting story that, again, I don't think it's, I would say, a public knowledge, but my colleagues, especially Olga from Odessa Walks, she might have shared this info on her tours on Odessa, that Odessa, being an international port city, also had Greek population there. It was quite common for the Greeks to send their children to study and to work in Odessa because there was a lot of work. There was enough work for everyone, honestly, in Odessa. So there's the family of Spiros Benitatis or Benitatus. The two spellings are I have come across. So the Spiros Benitatis family sent one of their children to Odessa to study and also to work at the port. Eventually, Spiros Benitatis found a job as by the way, these are the photos shared in the catalogs. These are the postcards that Spiros would be sending to his family and back. So eventually he was able to find well, I'm not sure if you can read that. I cannot. Not even sure which language he's using. He spoke very good Russian, and later on, well, something is definitely written in Russian, something's written in English. So I'm not entirely sure which language that is. Looks like it's a combination of Greek and Russian. Not sure. I haven't really studied this very thoroughly. He found a job as an assistant at a butchery. And further on, he was able to open his own butchery, and he became a supplier to many restaurants in Odessa. So he became quite well off. So when the revolution came, he obviously had been deprived of all of his business, and he, together with his Greek wife, by the way, whom he took from Greece and brought to the Russian Empire prior to the revolution. So he and his children eventually they left for Greece. They returned, but they and there are many stories like that. So that's Spiros and his wife, and there are many stories like that. There were a lot of Greeks that returned also from Odessa to Greece, and they many of them and children especially did not even consider themselves Greeks. Children couldn't speak Greek, and they had to learn it from scratch. That was not easy. Plus, the Greeks that had been living in Greece, they did not really consider them as equals, as locals, because they had been living in another country. So that's the big family of the Benitatis, and they had to start things from scratch. Also, from the memoirs of the descendants of the Benitatis, I even found an interview with this family. It was in Greek with Russian translation. I'm not sure whether it can be found in English. I don't think so, because it was all recorded by the Russian community in Greece, Russian immigrants community in Greece. So the family remembered that the children had a portrait of Nicholas II in his room, and they would still, upon entering the room, they would be kissing the portraits of Nicholas II and the children. So the children were very much Russians and definitely broad-Tsarist, for sure, 100%. So the children, the family was well off. They were able to take some money with them and everything. So they were given good education. They studied multiple languages. They spoke good English and French. They also had been learning it before their immigration, while still living in Odessa. But they had to study Greek, and that was a big, big issue. But because the children had been given good education in general, many of them were able to find job as music teachers. Remember Nabokov? That was also one of his jobs in Germany. Um, um, and also they found job in the cinemas playing music, because in the cinemas it was silent movies and they needed someone to play along. And eventually they also, some of them also became land surveyors as well and engineers, and they opened even their architecture bureau. And uh, uh, the descendants, the Benetatis family descendants, still work for these. They still have this architecture bureau functioning. Um, so finding the place in life was a big issue. And we spoke about it a lot. And again, each country has a very different story. It's different from country to country. So Greece, you see, also had its specificities, also because of, I would say, a big overlap in immigration waves, plus the political situation, plus the First World War, plus the a lot of other deterioration that the country from the 1870s, that the country had not really recuperated by the time of the First World War started. So that was quite challenging in general. But indeed, the Russian immigrants, regardless of their origins and background, they would take any job given to them. They would be happy to work for a very low salary, which was a huge dumping, obviously, on the market. And but exactly thanks to them, so the land was wisely divided. So the land surveying was done at a very good level, and little by little, the country was sort of, well, recuperated from those, I would say, quite stormy decades honestly. Um, Obviously, what I'm saying, regardless of their background, people work together, yes and no. Anyway, let's say in the end of the day, people would mingle with the like-minded, with people of a similar background. And um, the Greeks from Odessa, they would mingle with the Greeks from Odessa. The Russian immigrants, aristocrats, would mingle with other aristocrats. I would say, the average people, like the workers, they would stay with the people alike. There is a story that I also came across, the story of Alkiviadis Kakinakis. I don't speak Greek, so sometimes it might be challenging to read the names. Please forgive me. So, Altianis Kakinakis, he lived in Odessa. According to some documents, he was even born there. So his parents had been living in Odessa before he was born. And he was given some good education in Ukraine, in Kiev, and then he went to St. Petersburg to study chemistry. He was a chemist in general. And he was in charge of one of the fire stations in St. Petersburg. And then revolution happened. He came not from Odessa, but he came from St. Petersburg. Well, obviously not directly from St. Petersburg. He would go to the south of the country, just like everyone else. He served in the White Army, and eventually, so through Lemnos, he came. He came, and he little by little, by mid-1920s, he had helped Greece establish its fire department at Lemnos and in some other areas, and basically he managed to set up the work of the fire department brigades across the country. Obviously, he is remembered for that, and his contribution is absolutely impossible to overestimate. Speaking of, let's say, the creative class, Mikhail Latry. I do not expect you to know who Mikhail Latry was, but you may remember his granddad. His granddad was Ivan Aivazovsky, Russian marine artist #1. We spoke a lot about him on my Russian museum tours, but by the way, they were of Armenian descent, but that's not really relevant. What is relevant is that Mikhail Latry inherited the talent from his granddad, and he also came to Greece. He stayed in Greece up until 1930s, late 1920s. Eventually, he would go to France because he was a good artist, and he felt he needed more space. He needed to broaden his horizon, so he moved to France. And in 1935, he even had his exhibition of his works, sole exhibition of his works. So his art was recognized. So that's one of his artworks, 1908, and he left a lot of. He has that's Ivan Aivazovsky, just in case you forgot who I'm talking about. Well, if you just, let's say, look up Russian 19th century marinescapes, that will be Aivazovsky. So he was the monopolist. Definitely, definitely. He left about 3,000 artworks, so he was quite prolific and productive. So Mikhail Latry, while living in Lemnos and also in some other countries as well, cities in Greece, he did a lot of artworks. He depicted a lot of port life, and he took all that to France with him. And these works were exhibited in France. And well, he was quite famous and recognized by the contemporaries, but obviously now his art has been quite forgotten. For some time, he was even in charge of the Greek Academy of Fine Arts, and after that, so he realized he needed something else, and left for Paris. That's how it was. So that's the port life in Greece. I think this is where we're going to wrap this up for now. In the next episode, because we haven't had the Q&A, we're going to have it now. So let me turn on the chat, and I will try to share with you the complete schedule with the next episode also up. Give me a second. So I hope I will be able to do that. So let me know if you have any questions. The chat is open. I'll be happy to answer them. So the links that I'm sharing are the links for tonight, for tomorrow, and also some tours for the next weekend are already there. Wait a second. So tonight, I will be doing one more tour. In 30 minutes from now, it will be a talk. It will be visiting the St. Petersburg Cathedral #1, Peter and Paul Cathedral. That also happens to be the burial vault for the crowned Romanov members. So if you want to see the graves of Peter the Great and everyone up until Nicholas II and his family, Well, that's definitely the tour I highly recommend not to miss. Thank you so much, Dolly. Thank you, dear. Did many Jews escape from the Soviet in this time? In the next episode, we will talk more about it, but I will explain right now. I will explain the following. So Thessaloniki had a big Jewish community even before that. So those who left before 1920 well, again, it will be mostly Odessa. Imagine how many Jews were there. So most Jews would leave for Thessaloniki, and they would go there to be with other Jews. And there, I will be talking about some of the quite prominent figures in the Jewish community. So, but that's not about Lemnos, not even the Pyrenees. It's mainly Thessaloniki. And also, those who left after 1920s, they would also either go to Thessaloniki or would basically leave for Europe. Yes, but in terms of Georgia, there was very little Georgian presence. I will mention a few figures that would visit Greece, but well, unfortunately, we're talking here about just a couple of people, so there wasn't really, I would say, the big Georgian presence in Greece. You see, every country is different, so I can't just think it up. I can't make it up, right? So that's how things were. But I'm not talking about like Soviet Jews, Sharon. I'm talking about the basically the these Jews did not really call themselves Soviet. They would call themselves obviously the still subjects of the Russian Empire. Um, Thank you, Sharon, for the question. So Dole is saying, my family fled from Leningrad to Israel and some to Germany. They managed to leave to France before the Holocaust. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I would say that that's interesting, by the way. That also I'll say now, and then more will be in the next episode with their art. Yes, with their art. So the interesting thing is that those who left before 1920, so with the interventions, they were able to take a lot of things with them. So those would be the richest, I would say, Jews, and they took a lot with them altogether. After 1920, it was, I would say, well, there were a lot more restrictions, obviously. So it would be, I would say, a poorer, I would say, segment coming to Thessaloniki. Yeah. Okay. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. Sorry for the noise at the back. Yeah. So my boys are here in the room as well, but they're. You can say you're sorry, just in case if you feel like. So Grisha.
Sorry, we are playing Monopoly.
Yeah, Monopoly.
Monopoly, and
yeah, things just got a little bit heated. Yeah. Exactly. I hope you've been able to hear Grisha, so he's sorry. So I forgive him. I mean, I forgive you. I hope they forgive you too. Yeah, Cheryl forgives you, looks like. She's giving you the hug smiley. So I think it's okay. They had to leave all their as. Of course, people leaving from Leningrad. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dolly. Dolly saying you're cute. Ronnie agrees. So you're forgiven, but don't do this again, please. Okay, I hope he understands. He's not gonna get a haircut. That's not going to happen.
it's fine.
He's not going to have his haircut. I gave up on that, and I already like it so much, so it's all natural, and I think he's just going to be like his mom. Okay, so thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your interest in these topics. So next time, we're talking more about the Jewish presence, some more interesting figures in the Greek culture of Russian descent, I mean, Russian Empire background. And also, hopefully, I will be able to share with you the short story of, yeah, Mini Anna version 2.0. Absolutely. Um, And then hopefully I will be able to touch upon the story of a Russian immigrants community in Tunisia, which is again quite unexpected, but yes, that indeed happened too. Thank you, Sharon. Yeah, definitely. He already looks a bit like a hippie for sure, for sure. Okay, so thank you so much, everyone. I'm hoping to see you in less than 30 minutes from now in St. Petersburg. The link is there on the chat. As you know, all my tours are free to join, and your tips are highly appreciated and important. You have all the ways, all the links there on the chat, so you can either send me a PayPal donation, thank you those who already have supported me, as well as you can just buy me a coffee or coffees. It works fine, both options. More tours are already up on my website, and as you know, I will be traveling and I'll be doing a lot more live streams from the Holy Land. So you're welcome to join me. I will be keeping you updated and all that. So see you in 27 minutes from now in St. Petersburg. Thank you so much, and bye bye. Yes, 3 tours tomorrow, only three, because I thought to take it lightly, I will be traveling, so I thought not four, but 3 tours. Altogether, 6 tours this weekend. Mark, thank you so much for the coffee. Thank you. Yeah, so tomorrow it's going to be Batumi Botanical Garden, New Holland Island in St. Petersburg, and Jerusalem Ramparts Walk. We're going to be walking on the city, old city walls. Yes, that's the plan for tomorrow. In a very different setting, though. Okay, bye bye, everyone. See you soon. Yeah, just free. I know.